Hello, I am Ree, and I am a trans woman living in Kolkata, India. I actually identify as Koti, but for people who are not accustomed to non westernized gender identity, uh, I go by transsexual woman. Uh, so I am putting this out to get it out of the way so that we can get into the things that I am doing the life for. Uh, I do a lot of the things that are very difficult to put into words or explain what I do. So, sorry for the noise. I run a few digital stuff for the benefit of the queer community and the local public. And one of such things is I am hosting a digital library. We have about 26, 27 people signed up for the library, and all the collection in the library is based on the required books or recommended books from the users themselves. Since I am curating and maintaining this library, I think I need to know all the books, and instead of depending on a generated review, I should write all of their reviews. However, I was not finding a lot of time to read the books, so I have decided to take one day of the week, sit down, read the book as much as possible, and then the review of the book for the library itself. I have also wanted to start with Gulamgiri because that's a book I have been meaning to read for a very long time. I have started reading the book multiple times, but halfway through I had to stop reading it. And this is the book currently. If I go to the information, this is an English translation. This currently does not have any uh, description or review written. So before writing any of that, I think I need to read the book. I also think this is a very important book that uh, others should also read. And so, without any further ado, I'm just going to start reading the uh, book itself. I'm sorry, it already was opened. So, this is the front cover, and the name of the book and the full subtitle is Slavery in the Civilized British Government under the Cloak of Brahminism, exposed by Jyotirao Govindarao Phule. It's said exposed because no one before Phule actually talked about uh, casteism in this manner under the British or the Brahmin, as Phule says, under the cloak of Brahminism. So this also reads like an expose as well. This was originally written in Marathi and is translated by Professor P.G. Patil. It was translated in 1991. Some dignitaries from United States came over. It was dedicated to them, as we can see. There is a quote from Mahatma Phule as well. And the quote says, "In the cause of Negro slavery, and with an earnest desire that my countrymen may take their noble example as their guide in the emancipation of their Sudra brethren from the trammels of Brahmin thraldom." I am not going to read the foreword. I am also not going to read the respectful salutations uh, or the translator's submission. I am going to start from preface. If required, I think it's better to revisit, especially the translator's uh, submission after we have finished the book, but not before. This is a biography or brief life sketch um, by Dr. Y.D. Farke. We are also ignoring this, and we will be starting from here. Preface. The day that reduces a man to slavery takes from him the half of his virtue. Homer. Our system of government in India is not calculated to raise the character of those subject to it. Nor is the present system of education one to do more than over educate the few, leaving the mass of the people as ignorant as ever and still more at the mercy of the few learned. In fact, it is an extension of the demoralizing Brahmin ridden policy, which perhaps has more retarded the progress of civilization and improvement in India generally than anything else. Colonel J. Colonel G. J. Haley on fisheries in India. Many ages have elapsed since peculiar resources were afforded to the Brahmins, but the most considerate cosmopolite would hesitate to enroll them amongst the benefactors of the world. They boast of vast stores of ancient learning, they have amassed great riches, and been invested with unbounded power. But to what good end? They have cherished the most degrading superstitions and practiced the most shameless impostures. They have arrogated to themselves the possession and enjoyment of the rarest gifts of fortune and perpetuated the most revolting system known to the world. It is only from a diminution of their abused power that we can hope to accomplish the great work of national regeneration. Meade's Sepoy Revolt. Recent researches have demonstrated beyond a shadow of doubt that the Brahmins were not the aborigines of India. At some remote period of antiquity, probably more than 3000 years ago, the Aryan progenitors of the present Brahmin race descended upon the plains of Hindustan from regions lying beyond the Indus, the Hindu Kush, and other adjoining tracts. According to Dr. Pritchard, the ethnologist, they were an offshoot of the great Indo-European race, from whom the Persians, Medes, and other Iranian nations in Asia and the principal nations in Europe likewise are descended. The affinity existing between the Zend, the Persian, and the Sanskrit languages, as also between all the European languages, unmistak- unmistakably points to a common source of origin. It appears also more than probable that the original cradle of this race being an arid, sandy, and mountainous region, and one ill calculated to afford them the sustenance which their growing wants required. They branched off into colonies, east and west. The extreme fertility of the soil in India, its rich productions, the proverbial wealth of its people, and the other innumerable gifts which this favored land enjoys, and which have more recently tempted The cupidity of the Western nations, no doubt, attracted the Aryans who came to India not as simple emigrants with peaceful intentions of colonization, but as conquerors. They appear to have been a race imbued with very high notions of self, extremely cunning, arrogant, and bigoted. Such self gratulatory, pride flattering epithets as Arya Bhudev, etc., with which they designated themselves, confirm us in our opinion of the primitive character which they have preserved up to the present time, with perhaps little change for the better. The Aborigines whom the Aryans subjugated or displaced appear to have been a hardy and brave people from the determined front which they offered to these interlopers. Such opprobrious terms as Shudra insignificant, Mahari the great foe, Atyanj, Chandal, etc., with which they designated them, undoubtedly show that originally they offered the greatest resistance in their power to their establishing themselves in the country, and hence the great aversion and hatred in which they are held. From many customs traditionally handed down to us, as well as from the mythological legends contained in the sacred books of the Brahmins, it is evident that there had been a hard struggle for ascendancy between the two races. The wars of Devas and Daityas, or the Rakshasas, about which so many fictions are found scattered over the sacred books of the Brahmins, have certainly a reference to this primeval struggle. The original inhabitants with whom these earthborn gods the Brahmins fought were not inappropriately termed Rakshasas, that is, the protectors of the land. The incredible and foolish legends regarding their form and shape are no doubt mere chimeras, the fact being that these people were of superior stature and hardy make. Under such leaders as Brahma, Parashurama, and others, the Brahmins waged very protracted wars against the original inhabitants. They eventually succeeded in establishing their supremacy and subjugating the aborigines to their entire control. Accounts of these conquests, enveloped with a mass of incredible fiction, are found in the books of the Brahmins. In some instances, they were compelled to emigrate, and in others, wholesale extermination was resorted to. The cruelties which the European settler practiced on the American Indians on their first settlement in the New World had certainly their parallel in India on the advents of the Aryans and their subjugation of the Aborigines. The cruelties and inhuman atrocities which Parasurama committed on the Kshatriyas, the people of this land, if we are to believe even one tenth of what the legends say regarding him, surpass our belief and show that he was more than a fiend than a god. Perhaps in the whole range of history, it is scarcely possible to meet with such another character as that of Parasurama. So selfish, infamous, cruel, and inhuman. The deeds of Nero, Alaric, or Machiavelli sink into insignificance before the ferocity of Parasurama. The myriads of men and defenseless children whom he butchered, simply with a view to the establishment of his co-religionists on a secure and permanent basis in this land, is a fact for which generations ought to excrete his name rather than deify it. Ought to execrate his name rather than deify it. This, in short, is the history of Brahmin domination in India. They originally settled on the banks of Ganges, whence they gradually spread over the whole of India. In order, however, to keep a better hold on the people, they devised that weird system of mythology, the ordination of caste, and the code of cruel and inhuman laws, to which we can find no parallel amongst other nations. They founded a system of priestcraft so galling in its tendency and operation, the like which we can hardly find anywhere since the times of the Druids. The institution of caste, which has been the main object of their laws, had no existence among them originally. That it was an after creation of their deep cunning is evident from their own writings. The highest rights, the highest privilege and gifts, and everything that would make the life of a Brahmin easy, smooth going, and happy, everything that would conserve or flatter their self pride, were specially inculcated and enjoined, whereas the Sudras and Ati Sudras were regarded with supreme hatred and contempt, and the commonest rights of humanity were denied them. Their touch, nay, even their shadow, is deemed a pollution. They are considered as mere chattels, and their life of no more value than that of the meanest reptile. For it is enjoined that if a Brahmin kill a cat or an ichneumon, the bird chasha, or a frog or a dog or a lizard, an owl, a crow, or a sudra, he is absolved of his sin by performing the Chandrayan Prayaschit, a fasting penance, perhaps for a few hours or a day and requiring not much labor or trouble. While for a Sudra to kill a Brahmin is considered the most heinous offense he could commit, and the forfeiture of his life is the only punishment his crime is considered to merit. Happily for our Sudra brethren of the present day, our enlightened British rulers have not recognized this preposterous, inhuman, and unjust penal enactment of the Brahmin legislators. They no doubt regard them more as ridiculous fooleries than as equitable laws. Indeed, no man possessing even a grain of common sense would regard them as otherwise. Anyone who feels disposed to look a little more into the laws and ordinance as embodied in the Manava Dharma Shastra and other works of the same class, like Manusmriti, would undoubtedly be impressed with the deep cunning underlying them all. It may not perhaps be out of place to cite here a few more instances in which the superiority or excellence of the Brahmins is held and enjoined on pain of divine displeasure. The Brahmin is styled the Lord of Universe, even equal to the God himself. He is to be worshipped, served, and respected by all. Tirtha, holy waters at places of pilgrimage, and by dipping it into water, he makes it as holy as the waters at the holiest of shrines. You can see where the cholera comes from. A Brahmin may compel a man of the servile class to perform servile duty because such a man was created by the Almighty only for the purpose of serving Brahmins. A Sudra, though emancipated by his master, is not released from state of servitude for being born in a state which is natural to him. By whom can he be divested of his natural attributes? Let a Brahmin not give temporal advice nor spiritual counsel to a Sudra. No superfluous accumulation of wealth shall be made by a Shudra even though he has the power to make it, since a servile man who has amassed riches becomes proud, and by his insolence or neglect he gives pain even to Brahmins. If a Shudra cohabit with a Brahmin adulteress, his life is to be taken. But if a Brahmin unlawful goes even unto the lawful wife of Sudra, he is exempted from all corporal punishment. It would be needless to go on multiplying instances such as these. Hundreds of similar ordinances, including many more of a worse character than those, can be found scattered over their books. But what can have been the motive and objects of such cruel and inhuman laws? They are, I believe, apparent to all but to the infatuated, the blind, and the self interested. Anyone who runs may read them. Their main object in fabricating these falsehoods was to dupe the minds of the ignorant and to rivet firmly on them the chains of perpetual bondage and slavery which their selfishness and cunning had forged. The severity of the laws as affecting the Sudras and the intense hatred with which they were regarded by Brahmins can be explained on no other supposition but that there was, originally between the two, a deadly feud, arising as we have shown above from the advent of the latter into this land. It is surprising to think what a mass of specious fiction these interlopers invented with a view to hold the original occupiers of the soil fast in their clutches, and working on their credulity rule securely for ages yet to come. Anyone who will consider well the whole history of Brahmin domination in India and the thraldom under which it was retained, the people even up to present day, will agree with us thinking that no language could be too harsh by which to characterize the selfish heartlessness and the consummate cunning of the Brahmin tyranny by which India has been so long governed. How far the Brahmins have succeeded in their endeavors to enslave the minds of the Sudras and Atishudras, those of whom who have come to know the true state of matters know well to their cost. For generations past, they have borne these chains of slavery and bondage. Innumerable Bhatt writers with the self-same objects as those of Manu and others of his class added from time to time to the existing mass of legends, the idle fantasies, and palmed them off upon the ignorant masses as of divine inspiration, or as the acts of the deity himself. The most immoral, inhuman, unjust actions and deeds have been attributed to that being who is our creator, governor, and protector, and who is all holiness himself. These blasphemous writings, the products of the distempered brains of these interlopers, were received as gospel truths, for to doubt them was considered as the most unpardonable of sins. The system of slavery to which the Brahmins reduced the lower classes is in no respects inferior to that which obtained a few years ago in America. In the days of rigid Brahmin dominancy, so lately as that of the time of the Peshwa, my Sudra brethren had even greater hardships and oppressions practiced upon them than what even the slaves of America had to suffer. To this system of selfish superstition and bigotry, we are to attribute the stagnation and all the evils under which India has been groaning for many centuries past. It will indeed be difficult to name a single advantage which accrued to the aborigines from the advent of this intensely selfish and tyrannical sect. The Indian riot, the Sudras and Atisudras, has been in fact a proverbial milch cow. He has passed from hand to hand. Those who successively held sway over him cared only to fatten themselves on the sweat of his brow, without caring for his welfare or condition. It was sufficient for their purposes that they held him safe in their clutches for squeezing out of him as much as they possibly could. The Brahmin had at last so contrived to entwine himself round the Sudra in every large or small undertaking, in every domestic or public business, that the latter is by custom quite unable to transact any concern of moment without his aid. This is even true at the present time. while the Shudra, on the other hand, is so far reconciled to the Brahmin yoke that, like the American slave, he would resist any attempt that may be made for his deliverance and fight even against his benefactor. Under the guise of religion, the Brahmin has his finger in everything, big or small, which the Shudra undertakes. Go to his house, to his field, or to the court to which business may invite him. The Brahmin is there under some specious pretext or other, trying to squeeze out of him as much as his cunning and wily brain can manage. The Brahmin despoils the Shudra not only in his capacity of a priest, but does so in a variety of other ways. Having by his superior education and cunning monopolized all the highest places of emoluments, the ingenuity of his ways is past finding out, as the reader will find on an attentive perusal of this book. In the most insignificant village, as in the largest town, the Brahmin is the all in all, the be all, and the end all of the riot. He is the master, the ruler, the patel of a village. The headman is in fact a non-entity. The Kulkarni, the hereditary Brahmin village accountant, the notorious quarrelmonger, molds the patel according to his wishes. He is the temporal and spiritual advisor of the riots, the saukar in his necessities, and the general referee in all matters. In most instances, his plans in most instances he plans active mischief by advising opposite parties differently, so that he may feather his own nest well. If we go up higher to the court of a Mamlatdar, we find the same thing. The first anxiety of a Mamlatdar is to get round him, if not his own relatives, his caste men, to fill the various offices under him. These actively foment quarrels and are the media of all corrupt practices prevailing generally about these courts. If a Shudra or Atishudra repairs to his courts, the treatment which he receives is akin to what the meanest reptile gets. Instead of his case receiving a patient and careful hearing, a choice lot of abuse is showered on his devoted head, and his prayer is set aside on some pretext or other. Whereas in if one of his own caste men were to repair to the court on the self same business, he is received with all courtesy, and there is hardly any time lost in getting the matter right. If we go up still higher to the collectors and revenue commissioners' courts and to the other departments of a public service, the engineering or educational, etc., the same system is carried out on a smaller or greater scale. The higher European officers generally view men and things through Brahmin spectacles, and hence the deplorable ignorance they often exhibit in forming a correct estimate of them. I have tried to place before my readers in the concluding portions of this book what expedients are employed by these Brahmin officials for fleecing the Kunbi in the various departments to which business or his necessities induce him to resort. Anyone knowing intimately the workings of the different departments and the secret springs which are in motion will unhesitatingly concur with me in saying that what I have described in the following pages is not 100th part of the rogueries that are generally practiced on my poor, illiterate, and ignorant Sudra brethren. Though the Brahmin of the old Peshwa school is not quite the same as the Brahmin of the present day, though the march of Western ideas and civilization is undoubtedly telling on his superstition and bigotry. He has not yet abandoned his time cherished notions of superiority or the dishonesty of his ways. The beef, the mutton, the intoxicating beverages stronger and more fiery than the famed soma juice, which their ancestors once relished as the veriest dainties, are fast finding innumerable votaries among them. The Brahmin of the present time finds, to some extent, like Othello, that its occupation is gone. But knowing full well this state of matters, is the Brahmin inclined to make atonement for his past selfishness? Perhaps it would have been useless to repine over what has been suffered and what has passed away, had the present state been all that is desirable. We know perfectly well that the Brahmin will not descend from his self raised high pedestal and meet his Kunbi and low caste brethren on an equal footing without a struggle. Even the educated Brahmin who knows his exact position and how he has come by it will not condescend to acknowledge the errors of his forefathers and willingly forego the long cherished false notions of his own superiority. At present, no one has the moral courage to do what only duty demands. And as long as this state of matters continues, sect distrusting and degrading sect, the conditions of the Sudras will remain unaltered, and India will never advance in greatness or prosperity. Perhaps a part of the blame in bringing matters to this crisis may be justly laid to the credit of the government. Whatever may have been their motives in providing ampler funds and greater facilities for higher education and neglecting that of the masses, it will be acknowledged by all that injustice to the latter which is not as it should be. It is an admitted fact that the greater portion of the Indian empire are derived from the riot's labor and the sweat of his brow. The higher and richer classes contribute little or nothing to the state's exchequer. A well informed English writer states that our income is derived not from surplus profits, but from capital, not from luxuries, but from poorest necessaries. It is the proud product of sin and tears. The government should expend profusely a large portion of revenue thus raised on the education of the higher classes, for it is these only who take advantage of it, is anything but just or equitable. Their object in patronizing this virtual high class education appears to be to prepare scholars who, it is thought, would in time vend learning without money and without price. If we can inspire, say they, the love of knowledge in the minds of the superior classes, the result will be a higher standard of morals in the cases of the individuals. A large amount of affection for the British government and an unconquerable desire to spread among their own countrymen the intellectual blessings which they have received. Regarding these objects of government, the writer above alluded to states that we have never heard of philosophy more benevolent and more utopian. It is proposed by men who witnessed the wondrous changes brought about in the Western world purely by the agency of popular knowledge to redress the defects of the 200 millions of India by giving superior education to the superior classes and to them only. We ask the friends of Indian universities to favor us with a single example of the truth of their theory from their instances which have already fallen within the scope of their experience. They have educated many children of wealthy men and have been the means of advancing very materially the worldly prospects of some of their pupils. But what contributions have these made to the great work of regenerating their fellow men? How have they begun to act upon the masses? Have any of them formed classes at their own homes or elsewhere for the instruction of their less fortunate or less wise countrymen? Or have they kept their knowledge to themselves as a personal gift, not to be soiled by contract with the ignorant vulgar? Have they in any way shown themselves anxious? Upon what grounds is it asserted that the best way to advance the moral and intellectual welfare of the people is to raise the standard of instruction among the higher classes? A glorious argument for this aristocracy were it only tenable to show the growth of the national happiness, it would only be necessary to refer to the number of pupils at the colleges and the lists of academic degrees. Each wrangler would be accounted a national benefactor, and the existence of deans and proctors would be associated, like the game laws and the £10 franchisee, with the best interests of the Constitution. Perhaps the most glaring tendency of the government system of high class education has been the virtual monopoly of all higher offices under them by the Brahmins. If the welfare of the riot is at heart, if it is the duty of the government to check a host of abuses, it behooves them to narrow this monopoly day by day so as to allow a sprinkling of the other castes to get into the public service. Perhaps some might be inclined to say it is not feasible in the present state of education. Our only reply is that if government look a little less after higher education and more toward the education of the masses, the former being able to take care of itself, there would be no difficulty in training up a body of men every way qualified and perhaps far better in morals and manners. In writing the present volume is not only to tell my Sudra brethren how they have been duped by the Brahmin, but also to open the eyes of government to that pernicious system of high class education which has hitherto been so persistently followed and which statesmen like Sir George Campbell, the present Lieutenant Governor of Bengal, with broad and universal sympathies, are finding to be highly mischievous and pernicious to the interests of government. I sincerely hope that government will here long see the error of their ways, trust less to writers or men who look through high class spectacles, and take that glory into their own hands of emancipating my Sudra brethren from the trammels of bondage which the Brahmins have woven round them like the coils of a serpent. It is no less the duty of such of my Sudra brethren as have received any education to place before government the true state of their fellow men and endeavor to the best of their power to emancipate themselves from Brahmin thraldom. Let there be schools for the Sudras in every village, but away with all Brahmin schoolmasters. The Sudras are the life and sinews of the country, and it is to them alone and not to the Brahmins that the government must ever look to tide them over their difficulties, financial as well as political. If the hearts and minds of the Sudras are made happy and contented, the British government need have no fear for their loyalty in the future. 1st June 1873, Jyotirao Govindrao Phule. My God, I am taking a little bit break before the next chapter. That was a lot. It was also written in 1873. So, like in modern standards, in 2025, Nothing much has changed. Like the British system of governance hasn't changed, it's just switched hands. The one who benefits are not the British anymore, but no emancipation came from the independence that uh, many of the writers then were alluding to, especially Nojrul here in Bengal. Like he said, "Amra to jani sora janite pura bartaku enechi khas," and when you and that basically means we have bought a burnt brinjal instead of bringing the Swaraj. And if we put this in the context, the independence also worked out in the benefits for the Brahmins, not the lower castes. And also, the English here is quite hard actually. I even don't know some of the words, but I can make out the meaning based on the context. I might be wrong though in some of the cases, but I think I would want to say do a little bit of translation work in Bengali maybe for the book if I have time. Uh, and I think this system, this part about academia is very very true for Phule. And what Phule writes, like even today academia has become the new priesthood. Like uh, we have made so that uh, people cannot directly be casteist without facing some consequences. There are some consequences like the SCST Prevention of Atrocities Act. Uh, but what is happening here is people have reworked some of the works in like vague words, right? Merit is one of such words used uh, who is more Brahminical that way. Like academia, are like academics are the new Brahmins. People wants to be academic. They wanna do PhD because they wanna be the new Brahmins. Because right now a large amount of funding and power is also around that. Like this mystery that Fule refers to, that it is creating a like people who wants to benefit only the government. The academic system only exists to benefit the government, and being in the academia is something you can be without. It's like a easy money without doing a lot of labor. You don't have to teach. As long as you're Brahminical, you'll get hired. You don't have to study. You'll just pass without doing anything. There is no checking, no, nothing is happening. So the only way you get good marks in academia, especially higher and higher, is the more you suck up to the professors. And that's why more than 85%, 90% seats are empty for SCST students in government uh, uh, colleges. So the people they cannot find that are not sucking up to them, they are like huh, they are not just allowed in any way. I think the wine is also losing me up a bit, I guess. Introduction. Since the advent of the rule of Brahmins for centuries in India, here I don't wanna say Sudras and Atisudras. I want to mention Avarnas. The Avarnas are suffering hardship and are leading miserable lives. To draw people's attention to this, and that they should think over their misfortune, and that they should eventually set themselves free from this tyranny of the Vats Brahmins perpetrated on them, is the main aim of writing this book. More than 3,000 years may have elapsed since the advent of the rule of Brahmins in this land. They came to India from a foreign land. They were aliens to India, and they subjugated the original inhabitants of India and perpetrated a vile tyranny over them. When they realized that the original inhabitants had forgotten all about this, the alien Vats skillfully managed to hide from the natives the true state of affairs, having conquered them and turned them into helots in order to impress them with their own superiority. The conquerors devised many ways to perpetuate their own interests by various ways. Unfortunately, all of them succeeded in their objects because the original inhabitants were already a conquered race and were kept in perpetual darkness by being deprived of the knowledge by the Brahmins. That is why the poor people could not understand their conquerors' wiles and guiles. In order to overpower them and to keep them in thraldom for ages, they produced many spurious religious tracts and claimed to have received them directly from God as revelations. The poor ignorant folk were persuaded to swallow this lie. They further concocted many legends in their divine books to the effect that the conquered people should serve the usurpers faithfully so that God would be pleased, and that the main object of creating the depressed people was serving the usurpers faithfully, which would be a consummation devoutly to be desired. As per divine dispensation, they highlighted this fiction in their spurious tracts. The cough I did in the past, some Brahmin would go like, "See, you are getting ill because you are talking ill about us." That has happened, by the way. Even a cursory and casual acquaintance with these spurious tracts is enough to explode the myth of their divine origin. Even to our clever brethren, whom we are ashamed to term as brethren, the writing of such spurious tracts brings great discredit and contempt to the omnipotent creator of this universe and of men and things, and who has the same love and regard for all creation. Even our so called learned fart brethren would gladly acknowledge this. We are ashamed to own them as our brethren because they oppressed the downtrodden greatly at one time, and even now we are laboring under great disabilities in the name of this so called religion. And it is a universal truth that fraternal religion has no place for mutual oppression. We are forced to own them as our brethren, being the children of the same Creator. But the usurpers should not think only of their own selfish interests, but must think in a just and fair manner. Wise English, French, German, American, and other scholars will surely opine that the religious books are spurious because they try to impress upon the people's mind the greatness of the Brahmins by palming off the fiction that the Brahmins are superior even to the omnipotent creator himself. Some English authors in their historical treatises have already expressed their view that the fat authors have enslaved the natives in order to promote their own interests. Little do the fat authors realized how they have belittled and demeaned the splendor and majesty of God through their mean productions. God has granted the freedom to all people, including the depressed and the downtrodden, to enjoy equitably all things created in this earth, animate and inanimate. But the fat authors have concocted spurious tracts in the name of God, dispossessed the common people of their legitimate rights, and assumed a preeminent place in the hierarchy of society for themselves. Some of our what brethren may well ask at this point, supposing these religious tracts were spurious, How did the forebears of the oppressed and the downtrodden believe in them? How do some of them continue to believe in them even now? The simple answer to this is as follows. In these modern times, when we have the freedom to speak out or express in writing our thoughts freely, if a deceitful person were to take a letter purporting to be from a respectable person to a wise person, even if that letter be spurious, the wise person tends to believe in it for the time being, and thus is duped for the time being. The depressed and downtrodden who were kept ignorant by the hearts, being caught in their shrewd traps, were deceived and were made to believe in the spurious religious books, stating loudly that they were in their best interests. The words are deceiving the ignorant folks even now. The deception practiced on the simple folks is of a piece with the deception described above. There is nothing to doubt this nefarious practice. The birds, in order to feather their own nests, tender advice to the ignorant, downtrodden people time and again. This is why poor people begin to respect the so called learned birds. By this means, the birds have compelled the Sudras to accord honor to them which is really due only to God. This is why I am saying that academics are the new Brahmins. It's written only Brahmins were allowed to study at one point. So the academia, this learnedness, has been attached to them strictly. And uh, like this was written like in 1800s, and like almost 150 years later, sitting here, I have a lot more context than Phule. But even without those context, like uh, a lot of these that Phule is saying has been lost or purposefully hidden by years of practice, even including people who are apparently uh, anti-caste. By this means, the Bhatts have compelled the Sudras to accord honor to them, which is really due only to God. Aryans or Savarnas or Brahmins are not Hindus. Say they are alien, they are coming over from outside, no? They are claiming to be Hindu, but the only way they can claim to be Hindu by colonizing the gods. The only way you can colonize the gods when you are greater than the gods. The only reason they are ascribing themselves greater than the gods because they want to colonize the gods. By colonizing the gods, they are colonizing the religion, and whatever is being pushed as Hinduism is not Hinduism. It's it's a pagan ideology. We don't do temples. Hinduism originally didn't have temples. Hinduism originally didn't burn their corpses. If you go into the history of the indigenous people, of the indigenous gods, it's very different from what is purported. The temples only exists because it allows Brahmins to earn money. Also, only women were allowed to worship the gods before Brahminism took over Hinduism. I am digressing. We are here to study. No, not study really. That's a bad word. We are here to read the book. I'm digressing because I get distracted very quickly. This is a great injustice indeed. Surely the farts will be answerable to God Himself. So deep has been the impress of the deceitful teachings of the Bhatts on the minds of the Sudras. that they were prepared to oppose or fight the very people who were trying to free the shackles imposed on them by the whites. This is exactly the way the Negroes in America reacted to those kind souls who tries to free them from the bonds of slavery. From the next time, I'm also saying the saying black instead of the N word. They are not content with telling their benefactors, "Do not try to oblige us, we are quite content with our present lot of slavery," but go a step further and pick up quarrels with them. It is a very strange thing indeed. Be it noted that the benefactors of the ignorant folk do not stand to gain anything by their noble action. On the contrary, some of them have to sacrifice their lives and also to endanger their own safety and interests. Why are they actuated by these philanthropic urges? A little introspection will tell us that freedom is imperative to men, and it is the duty of every human to bestow this freedom on those who are deprived of it. When a person is free, he or she is able to express his innermost thoughts orally or in writing to others. Even important beneficial thoughts cannot be communicated to others for want of freedom, and thus they evaporate in course of time. The creator of this world, who is also omnipresent, has conferred some precious human rights upon all mankind, all men and women, but the selfish and cunning Brahmins have kept the people in the dark about their human rights. A truly liberated human will never hesitate to demand these human rights from his oppressors for himself or herself. Due rights confer happiness on people. The philanthropic people are inspired to confer freedom on everyone and then to make them happy by releasing them from unjust oppression. They reckon not the dangerous risks involved in such work. How noble and philanthropic is such work! As their objects and aims were noble, God crowned their efforts with success wherever they strove to this end. We pray to God to shower His blessings on their noble efforts. May they prosper wherever they strive in this good cause. The nefarious practice of capturing poor people and enslaving them has been in for many centuries in the continents of Africa and America. Some advanced nations or people in Europe and elsewhere were genuinely ashamed of themselves for this heinous crime. Many liberal minded souls in England and America tried hard to abolish this bad practice by waging wars against the oppressors. They cared not even for their own safety or interests. Many slaves were cruelly separated from their own kith and kin, parents, brothers, sisters, offsprings, and friends, and thus were passing through hellfires. As a result, they pined away and were on the point of death. Just then they were reunited to their dear and near ones through the kind ministry of these noble souls. All praise to these selfless American reformers for their noble deeds, but for their kind efforts and ministrations. The unfortunate slaves would have died without being united to their kith and kin. Were those who enslaved them treating them humanly? No, no. A recital of the cruel ways will wring tears even from the stony hearts. The slave owners used to kick them routinely as if they were brutes. Sometimes they used to yoke them to plows and make them plow their lands in the burning sun. If they sulked a bit, they were whipped mercilessly. They did not care to feed them properly. Many times they had to starve. The meager food that was served to them was most unsatisfactory and insufficient for their needs. Sometimes even this was not served to them. The slaves were compelled to put in hard work throughout the day till they broke down completely and were condemned to the stables for their nightly rest. They would lay down their tired limbs on the insanitary floors of the stables half dead. Even the sweet balm of sleep was denied to them. How could they sleep there? They were in terror of the call of the slave owners at any time in the night. Sleep eludes empty stomachs. Their bodies used to ache from the whiplashes rained on them by day, and they tossed from side to side. To make matters worse, the very thought of their near and dear ones from whom they were so cruelly torn apart wrung tears of molten lead from their tired eyes. In this helpless plight, they used to pray to the Almighty to take pity on them and to deliver them from this hell on earth. This is unbearable. Please send thy angel of death to us and deliver us, they prayed. Thus they passed the miserable hours of the night. Words fall short to describe their agonies, miseries, and hellish torture. Yet Sylvia Plath feels very free to write that she feels like a slave. Just something to consider. The good people of America has abolished the pernicious practice of slavery prevalent there for centuries and have freed many poor slaves from the clutches of the slave owners' tyranny. The oppressed and downtrodden people of India feel specially happy at this auspicious development because they alone, or the slaves in America, have experienced the many inhuman hardships and tortures attendant upon slavery. The only difference between these two categories of slaves is this: the former were first conquered and then enslaved, while the latter were captured and were enslaved, captured in Africa and were enslaved in America. The miserable condition of both types of slaves is identical. The hardship heaped upon the slaves in America were also suffered by the depressed and downtrodden people in India by the hands of the whites. Nay, even more, a mere mention of their cruel hardships will break the hearts of even the stony hearted. Streams of tears will burst forth from within the black hard rock granite which will inundate the whole earth. It will appear as a veritable deluge to some of the descendants of the Bhat brethren who dehumanize the Sudras if they possess some modicum of humanity, so glaringly different from other segment of the same fraternity. If the British rulers conduct an impartial inquiry into the true state of affairs regarding the Sudras, they will get a clear idea about the tortures and tribulations heaped upon the Sudras by the Bhatts, and will be convinced that important chapters from the history books of India written so far have been deleted. A correct perception of the miseries suffered by the oppressed and the downtrodden people is bound to affect their literature also. The history of the Sudras of India will be very valuable as a portrayal of the inhuman conditions to which these Sudras were condemned for centuries by their wicked oppressors. The tender hearted poet will be shocked beyond words. Out of evil cometh good. Poets so far had to invent imaginary episodes to create genuinely tragic emotions in their readers. The poets will now be spared that exercise in view of the tragic conditions of the Sudras. If the foreigners are so grief stricken over the miseries suffered by the Sudras of India, how much more must be the magnitude of the mental torture experienced by the present descendant of the original Sudras of India at the thought of their forefathers' miseries? A mere remembrance of the inhumanity practiced on the Sudras by their masters makes their hair stand on end. And we instinctively feel that if only the remembrance of their misery causes such sorrow to us, what hellish fires must the victims have gone through themselves? How Parashurama, the chief executive authority of the Bhatts of India, persecuted the original inhabitants of India. The Kshatriyas, the warrior class, will be described in due course in this treatise of ours. He massacred the Kshatriyas and deprived their poor women folk of their babes in arms and perpetrated the massacre of the innocent. He went one step further. He hunted down the pregnant wives of the Kshatriyas who were running helter skelter to save themselves, as also the babies in their wombs, and captured and imprisoned them. If they delivered baby boys, Parshurama would rush there and kill the newborn. It is futile to expect to get a factual and impartial history from the persecutors of the Kshatriyas. But historians may have deleted this sinister chapter from their history books as nobody likes to own up his wicked deeds. Still, it is very surprising that some of their chroniclers have recorded this despicable episode in their historical works, such as they are. The Bhatt chroniclers have recorded in their book that Parasurama defeated the Kshatriyas 21 times and massacred the young ones of the Kshatriyas' widows as a brave exploit for the delectation of future readers. But as the radiance of the sun cannot be obscured by the palm of one's hand, truth cannot be hidden or suppressed or forever. The might they might have been forced to record a partial account of the original inhumanity. The truth, like murder, will always be out. Even a cursory glance at the account of the inhumanity perpetuated by Parashurama saddens our hearts every day. What agony must the pregnant mothers have gone through when they were pursued by Parashurama and his hordes? Women were not expert runners, are not used to running. Some of them who were the consorts of noblemen were used to spending their days confined to their homes. The pregnant women who led luxurious lives under the protection of their husbands till then should have been forced to run for their lives. To protect the babies in their wombs is the height of misfortune. Some of them may have tipped and dashed against rough stones on the moor. Being unused to running, they must have sustained bodily injuries on their elbows, foreheads, knees, etc., and bled profusely. But the fear of the relentless pursuer, Parasurama, would not let them rest. Their souls must have been pierced by thorns, their clothes torn, and their bodies bruised by the brambles, resulting in inevitable bloodletting. The exertion of running in the fierce heat of the sun must have scorched their feet and also their tender lotus like complexions. They may have foamed at the mouth and their eyes brimmed with salt tears, not having obtained even a drop of water for days on end. Their stomachs must have turned sorely. They may have prayed that the earth should split open and swallow them up, as in the case of Sita, to save themselves from their relentless pursuer. O Lord, why hast thou brought us to this defenseless in the absence of our husbands? Why do you prolong our agony? O omnipotent Lord, why have you become a silent spectator when we are being butchered by this fiend who has murdered our husbands and is now persecuting us? Parasurama may have captured and carried away some of them as they prayed as above. Some of the women may have entreated him humbly, while others may have breathed their last in anguish and in pain. They may have entreated Parasurama to spare their unborn babies. We beg of you on bended knee this favor. You may kill us, but at least spare our babies. You have rendered us hapless widows. We will not be able to bring forth any more children henceforth. We are looking forward to the birth of this last child. Why would you drown us in an ocean of sorrow by killing our fetuses? Please grant this favor to us who are like your daughters. by these entreaties had no effect on the stony hearted Parasurama. Parasurama was the original your body, my choice dude. When Parasurama may have snatched their newborn from them, the mothers might have bent over them protectively and might have prayed to him to kill them if need be, but to spare their young ones, but to no avail. Our pen is powerless to describe the tragic scene of Parasurama robbing the mothers of their newborn. When he killed those children under their mothers' noses, some of them may have bitten their breasts, some torn their hair, some may have ended their lives in sheer grief, and some may have gone mad with grief and wandered abroad disconsolate, lamenting their irreparable loss. It is useless to expect from the Fats a faithful record of this dark chapter in our history. I have complaints about the translation. I don't think it's Phule. I definitely think it's the Western educated translator who is making this paragraph a trauma porn and putting in very different ideas. Why are they accepting Khatriyas at the? I am not sure. Phule is saying the Khatriyas were the original inhabitants of the India. I don't think that's happening there. I have to read the original Maratha one, or if anybody has read it, please let me know. But that's a bit odd. Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaisyas are not Indians. They are the Aryans. They are coming separately. That's why the skins are like lotuses. Indians are not supposed to have fair skin. It's like happening due to admixture. like like it's absurd to have white skin because the skin tone is dependent on the weather. Like, not even North Indians are supposed to have fair skin. Only the people who are living in the mountains, only them are supposed to have colder, whiter skin, warm, darker skin. Also, a lot of some of these white ideologies of education and all are coming in. I also don't think that's Fule per se. I also think that's the translator. So how we have to deal with that as well. Success in the system requires complicity. The Vats have brainwashed the depressed and downtrodden people to acknowledge Parsurama, their commander, who had massacred hundreds of Kshatriyas and who was responsible for the miseries inflicted on their wives and children. I want to point out that they can do it to their own people. They are doing worse to the people they don't even consider their group or even human for the being. Like, they're punishing the Kshatriyas because they oppose them. Like, hmm. Parasurama, their commander, who had massacred hundreds of Kshatriyas and who was responsible for the miseries inflicted on their wives and children, as the omnipotent creator of this universe. It is indeed a great marvel. The Bhatts who came after Parasurama continued to torture the Kshatriyas still further. We shall allude later on this treatise how the Bhatts used to bury alive Kshatriyas in the foundation of buildings. If a Bhatt happened to pass by a river where a Sudra was washing his clothes, the Sudra had to collect all his clothes and proceed to a far distant spot, lest some drops of the contaminated water should be sprayed on the Bhatt. Even then, if a drop of water were to touch the body of the Bhatt from there, or even if the Bhatt so imagined it, the Bhatt did not hesitate to fling his utensil angrily at the head of the Sudra, who would collapse to the ground, his head bleeding profusely. On recovering from the swoon, the Sudra would collect his blood-stained clothes and when went his home went his way home silently. He could not complain to the government official as the administration was dominated by the Fats. More often than not, he would be punished stringently for complaining against the Fats. This was the height of injustice. And here I want to point out that this is happening to Sudras. See, this is not happening to Kshatriyas. And yeah, so like I want to point out here that this structure of a priestly class, a warrior class who fights and grabs other people's shit, a merchant class when fighting fails so they can negotiate, and a servant class made up of like them enslaving people on the way are the clear signs of a nomadic barbaric group. Like almost all nomadic groups across history you will find bears similar culture, and the Sudras are not from them, like the slaves or the servants are not from their group. It's mostly prisoners of wars from villages they have ravaged and all. So like, and obviously in a group, if one, like we have also seen this in Christianity, like the whole of England's identity is literally about this opposing the church. And here when the warriors are opposing the church, in case here the Brahmins are punishing them, and it's establishing that they can do it. And I think one of the, like, even past then, like it was considered that this is part of our culture and religion, so these are also our religious books, but those books are also written by Bhatts, right? So they are not really our books, and they were not given access to lower caste people. So those books were never meant for enlightenment itself. Those books are the Puranas and the Vedas are not public consumption books. Those are training manuals. That's why they are only taught to Brahmins. That this is the way you can control the other people. And they just invoke that, see, this is written, you cannot read because you are not good enough, I can read. So, and then it does not have to be written anything per se. If people cannot read, you can just say, see, this is written here line by line, and you can just say whatever the fuck you want, and no one will be the wiser, I guess. So huh. It was difficult for the Sudras to move about freely in the streets for their daily routine, most of all in the mornings when persons and things cast long shadows about them. I- If a Bhatt Sahib were to come along from the opposite direction, the Sudra had to stop by the road until as for fear of casting his polluting shadow on him. He was free to proceed further only after the Bhatt Sahib had passed by him. Should a Sudra be unlucky enough to cast his polluting shadow on a Bhatt inadvertently, the Bhatt used to belabor him mercilessly and would go to bathe at the river to wash off the pollution. The Sudras were forbidden even to spit in the streets. Should he happen to pass through a Brahmin locality, he had to carry an earthen pot slung about his neck to collect his spittle. Should a Bhat officer find a spittle from a Sudra's mouth on the road, woe betide the Sudra. The Sudra suffered many such indignities and disabilities and were looking forward to their release from their persecutors as prisoners fondly do. The all merciful Providence took pity on the Sudras and brought about the British Raj to India by its divine dispensation, which emancipated the Sudras from the physical or bodily thraldom. We are much beholden to the British rulers. We shall never forget their kindness to us. It was the British rulers who freed us from the centuries old oppression of the Bhat and assured a hopeful future for our children. Had the British not come on the scene as our rulers, the Bhat would surely have crushed us in no time. which yes, I would agree. But I think the translator here wants to point out to the suffering of the Kshatriyas more, because that suffering of the Kshatriyas are killing of pregnant women and babies. That's a very clear Brahmin imagery of what non-Brahmin people or non-Savarna people are doing to Savarna people. This is literally one of the symbols of Islamophobia, that uh, they do this, and all the while they themselves have been doing the same thing. And this threatening part, killing the unborn babies part, is also very common in the Western Christian ideologies, no, the pro-lifer thing. Whatever is happening in, like, I think here is where we need to look at it as differences of like systematic oppression and just violent oppression. What is happening to the Kshatriyas are violent oppression. It's happening once upon a time, sometimes, to let them know their place. It's not a regular thing. Systemic oppression is happening to every generation, regardless of where you are. It is happening to you because it is trying to, the process aims to dehumanize the person. If the person completely forgets about his own value and rights as a human, it's much easier to make them do whatever they want. Many a times I have a lot of conversation with autowalas and rickshawalas when I am availing those services, and sometimes we get stuck in the road and they ask for a little bit extra, right? So I ask them, like, tell me how much extra do you think is right? And more often than not they say that, how can we ask for what we deserve? Like, you are the one riding the uh, riding the rickshaw, you should decide. And I tell them that, I have not done this labor, na. I can never judge what the fair price for this labor can be. So why can't you ask what is fair pay for your labor? And more often than not they say that they don't know how to do that, and they think that it's wrong to ask for the fair pay. So that's what they're doing. That's what this culture is teaching them, this dehumanization. You cannot know your worth. If you know your worth, then it becomes very hard to the clever one. But if the 10 are disunited, they would easily be duped by that clever one. The Bhatts have invented a very cunning method to sow seeds of dissension among the Sudras. The Bhatts were naturally apprehensive of the growing numbers of oppressed and downtrodden people. They knew that keeping them disunited alone ensured the Bhatts' continued mastery over them. It was the only way of keeping them as abject slaves indefinitely, and only thus would they be able to indulge in a life of gross indulgence and luxury, ensured by the sweat of the Sudra's brows. With that end in view, the Bhatts invented the pernicious fiction of the caste system, compiled treatises to serve their own self interest, and indoctrinated the pliable minds of the ignorant Sudras accordingly. Some of the Sudras put up a gallant fight against this blatant injustice. They were segregated into a separate category in order to wreak vengeance on them for their temerity. The Bhatts persuaded those whom we today term as Malis, Kunbis, etc., not to stigmatize them as untouchables. Being deprived of their means of livelihood, they were driven to the extremity of eating the flesh of dead animals. Some of the members of the Sudras community today proudly call themselves as Malis, Kunbis, goldsmiths, tailors, ironsmiths, carpenters, etc., on the basis of the avocation they pursued. Little do they know that our ancestors and those of the so called untouchables, Mahars, monks, were blood brothers. Their ancestors fought bravely in defense of their motherland against the invading usurpers, the Bhatts, and hence the wily Bhatts reduced them to penury and misery. It is a thousand pities that, being unmindful of this state of affairs, the Sudras begin to hate their own kith and kin. The Bhatts invented an elaborate system of caste distinction based on the way the other Sudras behaved towards them, condemning some of the lowest rung and some to a slightly higher rung. Thus, they permanently made them into their proteges, and by means of the powerful weapon of the iniquitous caste system, drove a permanent wedge among the Sudras. It was a classic case of the cats who went to law. The Bhatts created dissensions among the oppressed and the downtrodden masses, and are battening on these differences and are leading luxurious lives thereby. The depressed and the downtrodden masses in India were freed from the physical bodily slavery of the Bhatts as a result of the advent of the British Raj here. But we are sorry to state that the benevolent British government have not addressed themselves to the important task of providing education to the said masses. That is why the Sudras continue to be ignorant, and hence their mental slavery regarding the spurious religious tracts of the Bhatts continues unabated. They cannot even appeal to the government for the redressal of their wrongs. The government is not yet aware of the way the Bhatts exploit the masses in their day to day problems, as also in the administrative machinery. We pray to the Almighty to enable the government to kindly pay attention to this urgent task and to free the masses from their mental slavery to the machinations of the Bhatts. I am deeply beholden to Sri Vinayak Babji Bhandarkar and Rao Sahib Sri Rajanna Lingu for their continued